Hello, welcome everyone. This is Mihai Algiu, founder of Circle of Being Shadow Work, a deep programming modality. And this is my guest speaker, Scott Killaby. Welcome, Scott, for the third time.
Thanks for having me.
Scott is a spiritual teacher and also is, I guess in my book, is one of the most ultimate therapists that I've known, and also specializing not just in spiritual teaching, but also in working with addiction, trauma, and any other array of mental health issues using a cutting-edge modality, which is primarily awareness-based somatic inquiries. And this is our third episode. And this is part of this series, Psychotherapy and Non-Duality, which will be, if we have like two circles overlapping, our discussion is in the area of overlapping of these two circles of, people seeking awakening, enlightenment, liberation, Buddhism, Zen, non-duality, and at the same time intersecting with processing trauma, addiction, any subconscious wounding that somehow we all have, whether we seek enlightenment or we are awake or half awake or whatever. So that's what we are talking about. And yeah, feel free to watch the previous two episodes where we go in depth about various important topics. So let's just get into it, Scott. We were just talking that in working with people, you notice some particular characteristic that is what you call a peacemaker, or in other terminologies called a good boy, good girl shadow, kind of stay small, be good, don't stir the boat, don't stir waves. So is there some type of subconscious patterning, which is, we are not born with it. Actually, we are born wild and undomesticated, but then somehow in our dealing with the big people, with the adults in the world, something happens, and then the child learns that, oh, it might be safer, and I might get more love and avoid unkindness or beatings or whatever if I am good. So, and this somehow it served in childhood, and somehow then in teenage years it develops and becomes part of our personality as ego. And then there's a lot of problems with that. So can we speak about this and share on that what you noticed and why is this a problem?
Well, I noticed it in my own experience first, because if you go to the anger repression issue that I've shared relentlessly with everyone, that's an example of the complacency that I think with the 9 type that can, because being peaceful looks like enlightenment. If you're not aware, if you look at it from the outside, it looks like that person is deeply at peace with all, even with conflict, until you dig a little bit deeper and you find out that that particular ego, the reason it's so cunning is because it doesn't look like the loud, boisterous, triggered ego. It doesn't look like the guy yelling down the street or at a car, road rage. It doesn't look like the wife who's always upset about something. It's a very quiet ego, and it's a trauma response. It's like you said, when we were young, when I was young, I had this image of my parents fighting, and my sister was just she was kind of a little over the top of their personality. So I just learned how to play the role of a quiet peacemaker. And then I got into spirituality, and I realized that that's where it gets really confusing, because people are constantly telling you, you're a good listener, you're very peaceful, and then that reinforces something in you. And then what I notice is that that's where the complacency or that can come in right there when I'm working with 9s on the Enneagram, is like they sometimes have difficulty even understanding what their ego is, because it's so hidden and it's so socially acceptable. More than that, it's rewarded. And so I have to have talks with them about what is the nature of your particular ego? It's not the loud, boisterous one over here. It's not like that. It's going to be, some strands of thinking and feeling that you have to dig into. So another thing that I'm seeing is that with the awareness teachings or practices, that can come in and further solidify that in some people. So as they rest as awareness, because that also can feel very peaceful and liberating, it can reinforce these patterns and kind of hide them from us. And that's what happened with me is it's like through the years, I kept saying, where's my anger? Where is it? And I was genuine question, where is it? And that's how it hides. It's like, how do I say this? In the desire to be at peace, I may be repressing something really important or different strands of conditioning that are really important to go into. So I end up having to have these conversations with people like this, where they will just hide out in that awareness. So a lot of them are actually very, very attracted to the awareness, kind of just the awareness style things. And when it comes to inquiry, I've noticed there's some resistance to that, precisely because it mimics the awakening, the peacemaking kind of mimics it, and then they're blind to it. So I don't know if you want to pick up on that with a question or a comment.
Yes. I also happen to have a similar configuration, and then I've seen it with people. And yeah, so basically I can see how it is, I studied in the past, it was fourth way pathway, and they were speaking, there's a type of ego there or some type of egoic feature, which was called mechanical goodness, which is like, it's very insidious because it's very pleasant and people like it. And also it's a great listener. And when you have a problem, you go to such a person. But they were pointing to the fact that it's tricky to see for the owner of it, and it comes with a whole baggage, like hard to say no, it's hard to put boundaries, and some tendency to maybe live through others, or I don't know.
Yeah. It just something that occurred to me is, I don't know if I can put it into words, is the nature of that ego. Sometimes it's like, if we're looking for, how do I say this? In many of the ego structures, it's like when I'm triggered and I'm saying something to someone, that's when I'm identified. So if I say, Mihai, you're this and that and the other, and you're pissing me off, like that's kind of easy to see, well, there's something I'm believing. But if I just sit here quietly, that's the trigger. The quietness is the trigger. And so that's why it mimics the what people think of the enlightenment stage, the peaceful guru that's not bothered by anything. And they're missing the fact that your ego is that thing that pretends not to be bothered, or that cannot rock the boat. I think that's why I think it's so insidious and so hidden. And that's why I want to talk about it right there.
Yeah. So in this, like a pseudo peace, because it seems calm and it seems seeking peace, and there is a peace, but there's a cost to that peace, like maybe unspoken truths, inner compromise, going against oneself, going along.
Submitting. It's also submitting, like feeling of like, I have to submit to people in order to keep the peace. There's people who will say that, like being small, going small. A lot of different patterns.
It's interesting. And I started to work with this concept of anger repression from your teaching. And initially I thought, I don't have anger, I'm peaceful. And it's never been a problem for me, I have loss, I have grief, I have whatever. Anyway, so I was looking and I could see how actually was a lot of anger there. And then actually there was some other kind of anger towards myself. I was angry when it started to come out. I was angry. I didn't know what it was about. And it was some kind of anger that I'm not allowing myself to be real for so long. I'm tripping myself up. It's like blocking myself. It was interesting to notice that.
Yes, that's been my journey in the embodiment piece. Is that piece of it is recognizing that just those patterns right there and going into inquiries. This is where I'm trying to explain to people, and so hard, where you can come to the awareness teaching and just solidify that ego is what I'm saying. So I'm just trying to talk about it so that people won't fall prey to it as
Yes.
much. That's all. And you are too, I think. And we
Mhm.
both have
Yeah.
experience with this, right? You have that in you, and so have I.
Yeah.
So that's why it's helpful for us
Yeah.
to talk about it, because if we're spotting these things, other people may not be able to spot it.
Yeah.
Being able to say and do things is a thing that is very, being able to say and do things freely is threatening to a nine. And so there's one of the inquiries that I start off right off the bat with, to show the conditioning of the nine. Just pull up people in your life and say, I can say and do whatever I want. And then that's one good indicator, because again, speaking up is the trigger. Doing something that would rock the boat
Yeah.
is the trigger. Yeah.
So using some customized reverse inquiries geared towards stirring this into awareness. And so you are saying, yeah, I can say and do, putting pictures in people in our life. I can say and do whatever I want. Some other one would be like, I remember from, I don't mind if people are upset with me. This one was very evocative for me, putting people, I don't mind, or girlfriend, I don't mind if she's upset with me.
Right.
I don't need to be seen as good. Right. This is, so it links this with what you call goodism.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's another thing. It's so hard to see if I can say this, but if I can articulate this. Hold on a second. I lost it, but I just had an insight on that, and I'll see if I can come back to it. But this is what I'm saying. This is hard to get under, and yeah. But go ahead. I'll come back to it.
Impermanence of thoughts here. It's like the coming and going.
Yes. Here's what I want to say. When the peacemaker is not triggered, it seems like there's clarity. That's what I'm saying, because the peace mimics the clarity. So the clients say to me, look, what do I do when I'm not triggered? And I'm like, well, you still believe certain things. Like there's still a whole thing of conditioning, but because it's peaceful around them, they can't see it. That's what I'm saying. So you have to dig in inquiry to see that ego, the ego that is already at peace and is hiding things from it. You really do need to bring something to stir the pot up to show you that the peace is your trigger. That is your conditioning. And so you can get fooled into thinking, if I'm not triggered, there's nothing to look at, which is saying I'm at peace. My ego is at peace. Therefore, there's not anything to look at. But in those moments when you feel like you're in peace, go into what it would be like if there weren't. Like, pull up your wife. I can say and do what I want. I'm okay with conflict, that kind of thing. And then it's going to come up then. But if you don't ask those kind of questions, you can see how the awareness teaching would just kind of solidify it for people. It's like, everybody's pretty happy around me. Therefore, I'm not triggered. There's nothing to look at. I'm going to rest as awareness, reinforce the pattern, reinforcing it right there. So that's a tricky one to get out of.
Yeah, I noticed when I was doing the anger repression inquiries, the first layer of why it wasn't okay to express were some early family information, different reasons why it wasn't okay to express or feel angry. But as I continue with that, I would have some spiritual programs from various teachings I've done where they would say, hey, like expressing anger or expressing a negative emotion, it was considered to be that I'm asleep. So I don't want to be asleep. So I need to not express it and do something with it. So, and I remember also when I was in that phase of my evolution, if there was anything uneasy in me, anything like triggering or uneasy, I would be like, oh, what's going on? And then I would right away do something like do some self-remembering or some kind of something to make it good again. You know?
Yes. Well, I did that with anger for sure. I can just check into that. I'm sure I did it with other ways, but as soon as I would start to feel some anger, I would just somehow shut it down. Like, and so there's the value of it, is let it come up. That's the thing, is like, let it come up so you can see the insights that attach to it. But if you're just in the business of shutting it out from the beginning, we've talked about this before. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's so prevalent. So it's worth saying a few times so people catch it.
I was thinking about this topic, and as you mentioned about the 9 on the Enneagram type, some adaptive type. But as working with people, I noticed that this type of identity is very often found in women because culturally speaking, and because of the patriarchy, and because of hundreds and thousands of years of inequality, somehow a woman was, let's say, conditioned to be pleasant, to not say no, to follow what the man says, to be like an asset or a cattle. Or so then out of the transmission for all the generations of women, even women now, it's a little like it's still uneasy to express what she wants, or to say no, or to my needs matter, my wants matter, I don't have to take shit. So I can see that it's important work for women, even if now it's, let's say, free and equal, which I kind of doubt it, but this is very recent, you know. So
yes, it's cultural, and it also reminds me of like just the history of here in the States of how women were treated. Because I was an attorney for a long time, and you know, in the olden days, that's exactly what a wife was supposed to be. Like it's well, property. At one point, you're property.
yeah,
But even after that, even when we stopped calling women property, they still sort of, we expected women to just be there and take care of the family and not express their needs. So apparently we're still hanging out in that conditioning somewhat, and we haven't moved on beyond it. My mom was a kind of a strong woman, so I didn't see that in my own household, but I've certainly seen it. And then when women begin to speak, then some of the sexism and the conditioning comes out, because it's like, no, she's a bitch, you know, just because she's expressing. And we do that still to people, not
yeah.
always, but you can see it where it's happening. Whereas if a man spoke out, it's just like, well, he's wise, he's a go-getter. It's like, let's make him president. But when a woman does, it's like, you can hear it
Yeah,
in the consciousness, like, need to put her in her place, kind of thing.
yeah. And it's interesting,
Yeah.
even like the psychotherapy or psychology being a very new science, and clumsy. You know, even with Freud, some woman had some strong emotions, they will be labeled as hysterical.
Yeah.
And some problem, some serious problem. And so, all right, so then what do we do with it? We use reverse inquiries to bring it to awareness. And so can you outline a little bit some steps of the work and what you have seen, you know, with yourself or others, how the stages of freeing oneself from this look like? There any little dangers on the way, or something may get loud or clunky, or things will break, or any thoughts on that?
I was just talking to somebody about this, is just being in that sort of complacent nineness where you don't think you have a trigger. But let's say there's something that you want to say to somebody. And you know how for a 9, it'll eat away at a 9. It'll be like, I don't want to, and I won't. And so if you can find that festering in your experience, take that into inquiry. Like, I can say this to my wife. I'm going to say this in the next hour to my wife. And then that will start to bring up the inability to speak, and all the stuff attached to that, just to work through it. And then just watch what happens. Just, if you still can't speak up, go into inquiry. There's your block, and get it to the place where you can speak. And then even after you speak, if you say something, the first few times you may experience like shaking, fear, or afterwards this narrative like, I shouldn't have said that, she's mad, I've done something wrong. A lot of 9s, when they start speaking up, they've got to deal with that conditioning that hangs out for hours or even a day after. So I say, well, then take that to inquiry. Like, it's fine that I said something, I didn't do anything wrong. And then keep looking at it. But the great thing about it is that you can step out of that. Like, that's the great news. Like, if you go into inquiry skillfully, you can come out of it. But the point I'm making is that all the little places where you wouldn't, because it's so comfortable, the peace is so comfortable. And this is where the slothiness comes in, like the laziness, because it's like, well, first of all, that maybe requires too much effort, but that's not what's going on. It's not just too much. The inquiry is not too much effort. What it is that it's very threatening. And if we can be honest about that, like, we're threatened by these inquiries, of course, because it's threatening a very sense of who we are. And just to be more honest about that, just those things as they show up. Be honest with yourself. Go into inquiry around that. So the first one is, I'm just thinking, is like, if you need to say something, just turn that into an inquiry. I can tell my husband that I would like him to stop doing this. Watch what comes up, observe, observe. But the other thing, if you're just sitting around, is play with this thing around conflict. When conflict isn't up, it's sometimes difficult to go into it because it's not happening. You don't feel anything, but you can just look at someone like your wife or your husband. I don't mind being in conflict. We've done that before. Just bring that up. But for me, the thing that was more helpful than any of that was getting to the deficiency story under it. So just like with all the types or in ego, there's like a core or one or more core deficiency. So what I learned how to do, you talked about boomerang, is with my ex-husband, whenever I would get triggered and I couldn't speak up, I couldn't fight back, I couldn't say anything, I would pull away and just look at what is it that I'm believing about myself. So I'm unlovable was the thing. So I would just go into inquiry like, I'm lovable. And I would see all these viewpoints come up. And somehow in that, the woundedness would fall away, the feeling of woundedness. And there was an empowerment that just came from looking at that. Like I could step in and say something. There's that. There's also kinds of inquiries on anger, just being okay with anger. Like we've done that many times. These are the different inquiries that I find helpful for that kind of ego.
Yes. And now as I listen to you, I notice it myself and others, some people have this, oh, sorry, I'm sorry. So some excessive sorry. And so I guess this is part of the same kind of patterning. Don't wanting to be a burden, not wanting to be too much. I don't want to be too much. So definitely seems like some fear, trauma response underneath. Well, you know, my girlfriend and myself, we happen to be kind of working at this simultaneously, and we both had this kind of being good and not stirring the boat, and now kind of we're doing this anger repression expression, authentic expression repression work. So it seems like for both of us, much more stuff are now shooting, and so. I guess the idea is not now to be like radical and authentic and loud and boisterous. I mean, I guess this is a phase. This is a phrase. The idea is not now to hurt people or to kind of be like. There can be a danger in going in the other side, I guess, and being like being now identified, losing it, and juicing it. The like, oh, I feel like that, and you did this, and you know, that's not where we are going, right?
No, you know, and we talked about this last time. If you look at like Eckhart Tolle's teaching, just to use an example that everybody knows, he had a history of just overt anger. You never hear him talking about how it didn't feel safe to be angry. He didn't talk that way. So everybody's kind of looking at his teaching as the guide. But if we have to, some of us have to take a step before that, which is getting to the place where we can even be angry or show angry. And then when we get there, we're where he is. Like I can listen to him now because what he's saying is really wise things about what you're believing once you're angry, like trying to control others, make people different, whatever it is. But if you don't see that step before that, that can get confusing. And so what I'm saying is, yeah, once it comes up, it's just good old trigger work. It's stuff that we've known for years. The bigger issue is, can you get it up once it's up? And then once it's up, we don't want to ride the wave and just be addicted to the addiction and be addicted to our viewpoints. Like there's inquiry around that also. But again, it's the step before that is people get confused.
Yeah, ultimately, nobody is responsible for my feeling. My feeling comes like that due to whole interpretation configuration. So I can't say, hey, I feel like this because of you. But for the
we do say,
yeah.
So my husband and I, when I first came out of anger repression, we were doing that a bit, coming at each other. We put on our kitchen wall a bunch of different things just for more emotional honesty. Like instead of anger, let's talk about shame. Let's talk about fear. Let's talk about different things. And one of the things we have on the wall is if we get into an argument with each other, that's fine because sometimes that has to happen. But if it continues on very long, we go right into the inquiry. He's not responsible to fix my anger, to fix my feelings. And then what might come up in that is, yes, he is, because he did this or he didn't do this. But then in staying with that inquiry, sooner or later you recognize, oh, this is my anger. I can't, putting it on him is not going to help me deal with it. So that's another step in there, is once it's up, what are we assuming? Am I assuming that if I get angry at you, you're going to do something to make my anger go away?
Yeah.
When it's really my responsibility to see what it is I'm believing and feeling, to be with that. But it's tricky. It's tricky, especially for people who've not had anger accessible in their life. I've told Chester that when it first came up, I felt like a 12-year-old, frankly, when it first came up, because all my life is like, where's the anger? And then here it is. I've never had to deal with that before. So, you know, people who've been repressing anger can experience that, where it just gets put on other people because they don't have any history, any experience with really dealing with full-on rage as it comes up because it's been repressed. So that second level of inquiry is important. Once it's up, congratulations. But it's you're not done. It's like right?
I get you. So, you know, I had the thought, let's see if I can pull it up here. Oh yeah, so it seems like this anger repression work and diminishing, or not diminishing, seeing the good boy and the placator, and kind of repeatedly bringing awareness to it through inquiry, like investigation, it diminishes. But all of this is part of a bigger work of this dismantling whatever stifles authentic expression. And the idea is that if you repress one, you know, whatever, like, you know, in male programs, like, hey, don't cry, don't be afraid, you know, or so. But the idea is if you repress one, then you kind of repress all of it, because you are repressing oneself, right? And so I was talking to a client who is also into non-duality and Rupert Spira and things like that. And so I was mentioning, okay, so my question here is, they are talking about, you know, the seeming separate self, the false self, the imaginary self, and then there is like the real self, which is the open, empty, aware space of consciousness in which, you know, everything arises. And now we are coming with, in Hakomi, they call it, hey, like the authentic self. We need to allow the authentic self, and a lot of wound work is to allow this authentic self. But actually, so this person asked me, like, well, I mean, which self is that? Is it the false self? Is it the true self? And I was like, hey, let's not put all of those there. It seems like part of the work to have the natural configuration, you know, like my cat is authentic. So there is an authentic expression of Mihai, you know. So could you share on this, and how not to get tripped in the spiritual mind fuckery?
Yeah, that's tricky stuff to talk about. I just want to speak to my own experience, because the true self is the awareness that was recognized, and then so the ego is part of what gets seen through there, but then there are aspects of the ego that haven't been seen yet. So for me, the authenticity is bringing that stuff up, integrating that's also part of this expression of me. And then so the authenticity part is not just, okay, I'm the true self. It's that all these things are now online for me. I'm not repressing them. And that's not the same as saying I'm just the true self, empty, open awareness. There's it's something that was previously unconscious is now conscious and being integrated in a way that makes it feel like you're more authentic. And with the false self, true self dichotomy, it's like there's no room for it. Like it's either this or it's that. It's another duality in a way. So what is this that happens in between that is, you can't put in either one of those categories? It's like and for me, it's about repression and unconsciousness. Like whatever I'm not conscious of, I can't say that I'm resting in true self. I have to be honest. I'm resting in true self with some repressions and some unconsciousness.
Yes.
That would be more honest, instead of saying, because it's a hiding place. It can be open, empty awareness, but I don't want to be in conflict. Okay. So that's ego programming. That's part of it. False self, but it's hidden. Bring it up for authenticity's sake. Work through it, but not by repressing it back. Work through the viewpoints that are attending to it after it's up for more authenticity. And also you actually abide as the empty awareness more. As you're becoming more authentic and you bring things online, integrate those things, it's like you can abide more easily, or I can, it feels like, because these areas are not pulling me. They're not doing that anymore. Yeah, they're integrated or something.
Yeah, so
and I'm still in that process on a couple of things. You know, it's a process, but we're all in, and there's a couple of things I'm still integrating.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that the teacher or the expert is. I really like this. How you show up. You know, you bring up your secrets and your former shame or all of that. You show up and avoid. It's hard to put you on a pedestal. You know.
Yeah.
So maybe after you die or something, you'll get higher and higher. But like now, yeah.
I get it. Yeah. And for some reason, some people are not attracted to that because they're looking for that surrogate parent who's perfect and who puts on something that, and I can't be that and and feel good about what I'm doing here.
Yes. So basically it seems from what we are talking and from my experiences that the more, let's say, doing awareness practices or self-inquiry, so deepening the non-dual realization and investigating the subconscious, me feeling, me thought, this diminishes. As a result, authentic expression, whoever is doing that doesn't matter. I mean, it's always consciousness doing it, but authentic expression, it starts to be more online somehow through all this, looking at the light to see the light how it is, and looking at the darkness, and somehow it optimizes the system somehow.
Yes. Yeah, it's another way of saying it.
And more inner freedom, more inner freedom to be oneself, right?
It reminds me of the addiction piece that we work on, because people will say, okay, so I'm in recovery and I'm clean, so I'm just not going, and I don't go here, I don't go there, I don't do this. So that's fine, but what does freedom actually look like? Can you go to all those places in your mind and not be triggered? Can you be like, how do I say this? Instead of hiding out from these triggers, can you welcome them? So when somebody's really free in addiction, it's like they can walk through a grocery store and a liquor store and they've got inquiry and nothing hooks them. And they feel free because they can go down that. They don't have to hide from that. And that's the other thing about this, is what are we hiding from? Like, we say we're freedom or interested in freedom, but there's certain areas that we're not going into. And the freedom that comes up when you're able to go into those areas is a deeper freedom than hiding away from that. So I make that analogy with addiction for some reason.
Yeah, I think I heard this metaphor when I was younger. Like on a spiritual path, it's like you have this pig in the Viking times, and you put it on a stake and it's kind of roasting. But it's unevenly roasted. So it'll be roasted in some sides, but it'll be raw on some sides, pockets of we are not aware of all that. So kind of slowly to kind of evenly roast the pig skin.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like that.
So if we have just a little bit time, I wanted to just shift subject for a moment here. So I heard you on a video saying, hey, people, there's a video for people who want to work with you, and like recommended that, you know, if you want to do this kind of work, it will be good to have some meditation practice, so you hone your ability to witness. Otherwise, what we're doing here. So I heard this and I totally agree. I do the same with some of my clients. On the other hand, I heard you say, hey, be careful with spiritual practices and meditations, because some of them, they're not all equal. And some of them may have create bypassing or suppressing, snuffing of content away. So could you kind of walk me or all of us here through some kind of clean, solid, let's say, meditation practice which is helpful and it paves the path for, you know, regulating nervous system, but also paves the path for be able to see the uncomfortableness and not repress things? What's your best take on it now?
For people who are going to do this work, I would say like at least Vipassana style meditation or something more than that. So inquiry, like they're used to flexing the muscle of noticing thoughts, of feeling feelings. So the kind of meditation that I don't think is a great precursor to this is the kind where you just calm abiding, constant calm abiding, where you stuff things out. If something wants to arise, you're just gonna calm
Mhm.
abiding. That
Yeah.
practice doesn't flex that muscle much of noticing these thoughts. And so when people come to the work with that kind of calm abiding practice or with no practice at all, when I begin to like coach them into witnessing something, there's either a resistance to that because their practice has already solidified that resistance, or they just have difficulty with it. And it feels like efforting because it's not calm abiding. It's like, that feels different than calm abiding. There's dad's picture and there's a wincing away. So if they'll pick up the practice of sitting, and when something comes through, allowing it fully. So dad's picture comes through, and instead of snuffing it out, just letting it come through fully and noticing what happens when you let something happen fully. It just kind of has its own lifespan and it just falls away. There really isn't that much effort in that. But the ego might say it. It's just you're turning towards something instead of turning towards nothing. You're
Mhm.
turning towards something appearing in nothing and being with it and learning how to then feel something, like bring awareness to the feeling and let it be felt rather than just going back to calm abiding, calm
Mhm.
abiding, calm
Mhm.
abiding. So some sort of vipassana or advanced mindfulness or something that flexes that muscle of being awake to what you believe, not just
Mhm.
being awake, being awareness, but
Yeah.
being also awake to what, because if you don't, that's the stuff, right? That
Mhm.
triggers us when we're not looking. It's like
Yeah.
that stuff right there that we're not aware of is the stuff comes in when you're sitting with your girlfriend and
Yeah.
the trigger happens.
Mm.
So
I done some vipassanas when I was younger, like 10 days and all that. And so one angle, I really loved the context, but what I didn't resonate with, and I went against it, it was in the Goenka vipassana, the idea is to scan regularly the body up and down for sensation in a controlled fashion.
mm,
Scan the body up and down, back and
mhm,
forth in a controlled fashion. And so at some point I didn't resonate with that. I like the idea of, being aware of not just thoughts, but the bodily feelings, sensations,
yes,
and stuff. But I don't necessarily recommend now to people to go into this structured, controlled fashion, like a
right,
protocol, but like some kind of, Francis, my teacher and Rupert, they speak about these things like to welcome the totality of your experience that it is unfolding, and not just
mhm,
thoughts, all the realms, like thoughts, images, bodily
impressions,
sensation, and sounds, external
hmm,
sense perceptions, and to not interfere somehow, not to stop them,
that's good.
kind of something like that.
That would be a great foundational practice for this work. It feels like that is good because even subtle stuff like subtle sensations, subtle mental impressions, not just formed thoughts or formed feelings,
Yes.
but subtle, and then
Yeah.
tuning into that, then it's not that big of a step to come to this work because those
Yeah.
are the things that we're tuning into, how
Yeah.
that shows up.
Yeah. This thing like to not meditate just with the head, but to allow the whole body to come to the meditation, and the world
Yes,
coming as
yes,
perceptions. And okay.
that's right. So let's say it this way before we go here. I know we have to go. That's exactly it because the world that we're saying is made up, as you know, of words, pictures, feelings, and sensations. That's how we know that world. That's how we know
Yes.
all the objects in that world. So in calm abiding, where you're just going straight to emptiness, you're not seeing how you're perceiving the world in relationship because it's just empty.
Yeah.
So that's why I think people are saying, okay, it's great. I'm on the meditation mat, that calm emptiness. And then I get off the mat and my mom calls.
Mhm.
See, that's just it because you didn't let the world come in on the meditation mat. Mom got pushed
Mhm.
out in favor of calm abiding. So you
Mhm.
then have to deal with that when mom calls because you're not
Mhm.
open to that
Mhm.
part of your consciousness. So just like you say, letting the whole world come in
Mhm.
is really just essentially saying, I'm letting all of my thoughts and feelings and sensations come in
Mhm. Mhm.
and then being with those.
And this
That's
is
a really
the
good way.
sustainable, because then they say I get off the meditation mat and then I go about the post office, and so still witnessing thoughts, witnessing triggers. It starts to be less compartmentalized. Right?
Yes.
It's ongoing.
Yes. That's how I experience it. I mean, certain people might not agree with me, but that's just how I experience it myself, is that to open up to this throughout the day. It's not just meditation, but letting the whole world come in throughout the day, being awake to that throughout the day.
Yes. Did you want to, I know you need to go, do you want to say something? You want to announce something? Like, I know you have this weekly Saturday satsang or interactional meetings. You want to announce anything about that, or?
The weekly meeting that I do on Saturdays at 7 a.m. is really for people who've kind of already learned a bit of this and who are in the work, the somatic work. So if you come to that, not having done some of our work, it might be a little bit confusing for you. But if you've been doing this kind of work, like your clients, then you might want to show up Saturday. I put the link on my Facebook page.
Yes.
I'll probably put it today, and then you can come in Saturday morning, 7 a.m.
Yeah. And we are working on doing something together and inviting you here for various events. So we'll announce it as soon as we have it firmed up, and looking forward to that.
Awesome.
All right, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.